meeting to order for Monday, June 25th, 2018. And as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that Town Hall will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Hearing nobody, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just want to announce, so in case anyone is here for the discussion on the farmers market and moving it, we are removing that from the agenda tonight, and it appears that there's not a desire to do that, so we will not move forward on that. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, and anyone who is waiting for that, you get to leave early. So, is anyone here for a weekly briefing? Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Chief Dave Gilmet, Harwich PD. Chris, why don't you come on up? I'd like to introduce you to the candidate that is listed on your consent agenda this evening, Chris Arrigo. He's got ties to the Cape community, attended DY High School, and then joined the Marine Corps and served his country honorably for 8 years in the Marine Corps. And now he's back and he's interested in serving further, and serving our Cape community. So Chris is a very strong candidate. Your approval tonight will get him approved as a student officer, and we're going to have him standing up for the full-time police academy that's going to be starting in Plymouth in the fall, early September. So we're really excited to have Chris as a candidate joining our team.
That's terrific. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome. Thanks.
Anybody else for weekly briefings? Anybody for public comments and announcements? Hi, Amy.
Hi. Good evening, Conservation Administrator Amy Usowski. Just wanted to let the public and the selectmen know that this coming Wednesday at 9 a.m. we're going to have a work party out at, and when in conservation, when you say work party, it's work. But we're going to be doing some trail pruning and maintenance if people are interested in helping us out. It's a joint effort with the Harwich Conservation Trust. We're going to start at Hacker Conservation Lands, which is right up next to the DPW building on Queen Anne Road. People can park here and carpool up. There's not a lot of parking. I'll ask Lincoln if we can park at the Highway Department too. But we're going to work our way down to the Isabel Island Pond Conservation Lands. And it's a beautiful conservation area, and we hope to be done in about 2 hours. So we'd love for you to join us. If people have any questions, they can contact me.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? We'll move on to the consent agenda. We have a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to present the consent agenda and move for its adoption, including the following items. To approve the minutes of May 21st, regular session, May 29th, regular session. Approve appointment of Christopher Arrigo as regular police officer as recommended. Accept resignation of Patricia Scarnecci as an alternate member of the District Historical Commission effective June 30th. Accept resignation of Daniel Twerk from the CPC and Board of Appeals. Approve vacation carryover for the town administrator. Approve road race application by American Lung Association for September 29th. And approve road race application by National Multiple Sclerosis Society for September 7th.
Second.
Don? Any comments? Ed?
Nope.
Michael? Larry? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
For new business, report on the pet burial ground expenditures. Bob, we're gonna...
Yeah, Madam Chair, when this issue initially came up, I wanted to have it checked into, and with Mr. Lawton's experience and credentials, I thought no better person than to have him look at it. So the next few items are things that Bob is looking at on behalf of the town.
Great, thank you.
Brief overview, you have in your packet the report broken into 3 sections, one section on the facts, then a review, and then recommendations. Start off with very good cooperation from everyone in gathering all the information. Just as a note, all the purchasing statutes were followed with bidding and securing written quotes. Found the actions were done openly, no intent to hide anything that I could find anyway. But the issue is one of process. And there are 2 issues there, which are outlined in more detail in the report. The project was never put on the capital plan. It's required for projects that are estimated to be over $50,000 in value. I think this occurred because the initial estimate for the project was between $35,000 and $40,000 on the documentation that I have. Once the project rose close to and then went over the 50,000 limit, should have been put on hold, and then discussions held with the commissioners, town administrator, and the selectmen to see how to proceed. That's something you should consider on how or what policy you want to put into effect, that when something starts to get to that level, you have a mechanism to put it on hold and then decide how you're going to proceed. Part of that's going to happen with the recommendation on the munis purchase order system. That will start to flag things for you. The second issue really is the expenditure from the revolving fund. There were several opinions from council, one in May of 2017 from PK Law concerning an explanation of different definitions between cemetery and burial grounds. It was on a different topic and probably was missed, the intent was. But then in April and May of 2018, specific opinions were requested by from the finance director. And she received clearly that the funds in the cemetery revolving fund cannot be used for the burial ground. And when that occurred, then the finance director, the town administrator, and I think the selectmen were involved in putting the project on hold where it is today. So and I think that error is going to be rectified really as a transfer internally of funds that you'll be presented with a recommendation by the finance committee and town administrator. The other recommendations, and again, I'm not going to read the report. It was fairly lengthy with a lot of background. The other recommendations are on the last 2 pages, and they include going through the capital budget process, developing a funding source for the project. And I also think with the hiring of Mr. Malolio, the procurement process is going to be clear. And on the table tonight or in the packet, I think there was a chart that Evan had developed, which I think is going to be very helpful in controlling any future occurrences. And I think that rather than going, if you have any questions, I can go into any details. It seems to be fairly straightforward. I think errors were made, but nothing that really rises to any major level. But I think there are some ways with these 6 or 7 recommendations. If you adopt some or all of them, you'll be fine.
Okay. Any questions? Larry?
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I agree. Certainly, the intentions were good. My question is, the $50,000 limit to go to the capital budget plan, the outlay plan, and the fact that was exceeded over, when it went to 3 phases, to some extent. And it's implied in here, I don't know the answer to this, that there was some thought that it was going to be below $50,000 because we were going to use DPW effort in that. And that goes back to my argument all along, I guess, in other cases, is I think whenever we do a capital budget, we need to fully cost it out so that we know if it's internal costs, that also still adds up to over $50,000 and should trigger that value, even if it's internal plus external costs. And I'd like to, if I'm reading that right, I'd like that change to be made going forward.
Go ahead, yeah.
Just on that point, I think it's a good one. Part of the reason why we use the capital budget process in the forms that we did revise when I came with the capital outlay committee is it specifically asks for the department head to kind of look at all the related costs. Are you gonna use DPW? Are you
Right.
using in-kind? Those questions are on that form. I think here, you know, at least what I read into the material is we use those forms, and departments that commonly use them, police, DPW, fire, are very familiar with them. And you have other departments, like in this case, that they don't have that many big projects that are in that nature, and they're not as used to using those forms. So I think one thing from a department head level sense, I wanna make sure that I continue to reinforce that the point of the form is to make sure we have the form in function of how we're gonna go and proceed. Because the other part to that form is not just how you fund it, but what are ongoing costs to maintain it. And those things are, you know, that form is designed to get people to think in terms of projects. But I think, you know, we ventured into a new area, and I think that if we take a step back and just, you know, have the forms filled out and gear up so we can move forward for FY20, I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing in this circumstance is that, you know, it does lend itself to getting revenues from the operation. So let's segment off now that we know definitively, and it took council a while to get to that point. Now that we know definitively that pet burial should be separate, then I think we should schedule and set up a separate fund to be able to collect the revenues and do that venture.
If I may, Madam Chair, to follow, because that brings me to my second point. And my second point is that this really emphasizes the need for mentoring and review throughout the process, so that there was some mechanism to ask the question, are we going the right direction in a review, not after the fact, but as it's going on, to prevent this happening in the future. So those are my two points on this.
Yeah, and I do think with the, you know, the new process and the munis, we'll have a better oversight.
Yeah.
Michael?
All set.
Okay. Ed?
I'm fine.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, I'm just gonna build a little bit on what Larry said, because beyond this thing, it only kind of underscores the fact that you go to a town meeting, you get an appropriation after you get a capital plan approval, and it's all neat. It's based on knowledge of the townspeople and everything, but to the extent we got things that are going on with revolving funds, I think it's kind of important because the committee structures were never set up to actually get involved with operations. I really feel strongly that if you're going to do a project out of a revolving fund, it's still town money. I mean, it's still under the aegis of the town somehow. There should be some process of approval that transcends whatever area is expending the funds.
Okay. Chris, do you need us to take an action, or we don't?
No, I think that the way we had left it, there was an issue that emerged just before town meeting. We said we would look at it, and I think the results are the results. I don't think there's any follow-up for the selectmen. We obviously will administratively take some of the points that were made and implement those into the process.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see, is
Right.
some actions.
Right, and it seems like it's well laid out, so we'll go from there.
Thank you.
The retiree health insurance policy, the second reading.
It is the second reading. There were no changes, there was some outreach, but no suggestions were made by anyone responding. So I think, again, ask if the board would adopt the regulation as presented.
Again, I get
I move we adopt the, let me get this up here. The health insurance recommendation of June 4th, 2018, as read the previous meeting. This is the second meeting, and we approve it.
Second that.
Okay. Any comment? Don? Ed?
Given the opportunity for the second reading, that's all I cared about.
Okay. Michael? You have
No.
Okay. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Revised Community Center Director job description.
Third item, at your last meeting, you adopted the new pay scale for the position, and you asked that the job description be updated to reflect what is going on today, not including the cultural center. That's another issue that you will deal with at some other point. So all this is, with the cooperation of Caroline, is the update using proper format and the existing work that she does at the community center.
Does anyone have any questions? Michael? Sorry, I usually start with you, Larry, but I went to Michael.
Good.
I have one comment, but I'll wait till everyone's done.
Okay, Larry?
Well, I appreciate Bob and Carolyn input into this because it fulfills my request. I want to be sure the pay scale reflects the position description. So,
Yes, sir, without
you.
the cultural center. Yes.
Right. Ed?
No.
Don?
I'm with Larry, that was my major concern.
Michael?
I just want to publicly thank Bob Lawton. I think that was probably your last action as our acting assistant town administrator, or do you have
This
one
year.
more?
Yes, one more.
All right,
One
well,
more,
I'm
and then he's
gonna-
done.
I'm gonna thank you now. Bob stepped in, your level of professionalism is excellent, and thank you.
He's got another year.
but you're always on call, aren't you, Bob?
What?
We have you on speed dial.
Something about a boat.
Okay, the reclassification of, oh,
You
wait,
do
you
need to
need,
form- you do
sorry.
need to formally
I'm
vote
moving
that,
right
the
along, I'm trying to get
revised
Bob
job
out.
description.
Bob wants to leave. Okay, so, can I get a,
Well, I move we approve the
thank you.
new position description for the community center director at a classification M5, 40 hour.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
And the
now,
last issue
No,
that
go
I
ahead.
have, anyway. There was a request by the water superintendent for a reclassification based upon the work he is doing now as compared to other communities on and off Cape, and the wastewater responsibilities that will be forthcoming. We did look on Cape, and we also looked off Cape because the position requires, or the position will require some wastewater work. Not going to be maybe running the plant, hopefully it will be the Tri-Town plant, but there will be some responsibilities. So when we did our comparison, we did, as you can see on the chart, some other communities. The bottom step seemed to be okay, but the top step was lacking. So we are recommending that the position, it's a non-union position, be at M8 at step 6. And the reason for step 6 is that this will allow an increase in salary over a period of time, which will reflect the wastewater coming into his responsibility.
Mhm. Okay. Chris?
Just to, in terms of, this is one of the employees that by charter actually falls under the jurisdiction of the Water Commission. So I did attend the last Water Commission meeting and did go through what the rationale was. They did agree with the job description. The only thing that there was a disagreement on, and they have it in their letter and in their vote, was that I thought administratively, we thought that it should be looked at 5 years out, that not look at it every year, to let kind of phase 2 of the comprehensive wastewater management plan be implemented, and then see how that goes, and then look at it. The Water Commission thought that they should have the ability to be able to look at it each year. And I think you can argue the point either way. I think what I was trying to get at is we want to kind of let the dust settle to see how things are, and changing as you're moving isn't necessarily the best idea, but I don't really disagree that, you know, they want to have that ability to look at it each year, and that could be reasonable.
Any discussion, Don?
Not so much a question. I don't think that needs to be an emotion of any sort, because we could revisit it next year at our discretion anyway.
Okay.
Be willing to make a motion.
Ed, do you have any comments?
No. I mean, they're an independently elected body, and if they want to bring it up anytime, it's really up to them, you know.
No.
Larry?
No, I think you answered mine. Mine was only one of timing. Not the 5 versus every year, but just, you know, he's probably a couple years out from actually picking up the wastewater, so you want to fold that in, not now, but down the road.
Can I get a motion?
Yeah, it would take all of us anyway. Yeah, I move that we regrade the position for the water wastewater superintendent to an M8 step 6 effective July 1st, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, and if I could just, I want to give Bob a chance, but before he goes, I
Yeah.
just, you know, these jobs are very difficult to begin with, and not having an assistant for almost 6 months during kind of a critical time of the year. You know, I was at a manager's meeting, and, you know, I went over to Bob and I said, Bob, you know, I could use your help. And, you know, there was no hesitation. It was just, he's such a professional. He's a real credit to the profession, and his willingness to come and help during this difficult time made town meeting and made things so much more smoother, and probably saved my sanity to a large degree for that 6-month period. These jobs are tough enough, but I just wanted to kind of publicly thank Bob for his ability to come in, and having such an experienced professional. He comes in without missing a beat, which is really
Right,
an advantage for an administrator.
right. You've been a true gift to us, so we really appreciate it.
Although I did have to bring my own coffee machine.
That was not fair.
I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to do it. I enjoy Harwich. You have a lot of great people here, good crew that Chris has put together, and so I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you for all your help.
Yeah.
Yes,
So you
Ed?
can join
Well,
Charlie
and-
Sumner and
No,
No. And unfortunately for Brewster, we ran out your ticket this year, so that I have to wait.
there is an issue.
We've asked him back.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the, approve the purchase of town-wide radio equipment Phase 2 and authorize the chair to sign. Does anyone have any comments, questions? Anybody? No? You want to speak to that?
I was gonna say just one thing, Evan, since he's been on board, one of the things that we wanna try to do is to kind of make the system of procurement a little bit more user-friendly, so he's put together a procurement checklist. So we have included that in the packet. We probably will continue to kind of fine-tune as we move along. But just to let folks know that we have followed this, and I do have some of this backup material, and I believe that the deputy chief is in the crowd if there's any specific questions in terms of the overall project.
Do you have a question, Larry?
My only suggestion, because Deputy Chief is here, you know, this is a mandated purchase basically from the state. It might be just worthwhile 5 seconds to give us that information. It is.
David Blank, Deputy Fire Chief. Just to clarify, this is not the radios for the police and fire department that we're gonna be mandated by,
Oh,
that's on the
okay.
capital plan for next year.
Sorry, I'm glad you
This is-
clarified.
This is an idea that the chief and I came up with, copying several of the towns around us to kind of get all the town departments on a common platform. Comes in very helpful in case of hurricane, you know, large events, could use for Cranberry Harvest Festival, that type of thing. Water department's on board now, just to give you an update in the system. The system was built last year. It's on the water tank at Oak Street, behind the tech school. Water department's using it with great success. The rec department has all their radios. I have to install a couple in their mobiles, which will happen in this phase. They're looking forward to it. They've never been able to talk like from beach to beach. They've only been able to talk to beach to base. So being able to have that town-wide ability is good for them. And this will finish out the DPW, the backup for the police department, and hopefully with the amount of money that's left, to be able to do the final phase all in this year. So we're in good shape.
That's great, especially after the storms we
Yeah.
experienced in March, so that's nice to know, so.
I do just since Larry's comment, and maybe in case folks at home, we do have that replacement that is, I think, over 3 or 4 years, and that will start in a year or two to do the digital, and we've been assigned a new frequency,
Okay.
which kind of
Yeah.
precipitates that.
Mhm.
That hasn't gone away, it's just been delayed, so, and it has been on the capital plan now for several years, too.
And the good news and the information we're finding out with that, it's been delayed, the state, it's a huge investment statewide, but there's talk about a subsidy from the state for the individual subscribers to some amount of money to help offset the cost. So what we originally priced out is close to $1 million, if not more, may come down. If the numbers I'm hearing are correct, could come down significantly, but it's way early in the process, so it's too hard to tell.
Okay, great,
Okay.
thank
All right,
you.
you're welcome.
Thanks a lot. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Well, I think Ed's firing up.
I'm not trying to find where
The successful bidder was Comtronics
Yeah.
at $83,387.46.
move that we approve the award of the bid to Comtronics for $83,387,486.
$387.46.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Vote to sign contract for specialty vehicles for ambulance as approved by town meeting. Chris, do you wanna?
So, yeah, I can get started, and we have the fire professionals here in the audience. As you know, we do have a rotating process where we replace the ambulance. We try to do every other year, so we are up for our year. We did allocate in the capital budget $340,000. We do utilize a bid list that's available to us, and the chief, and I want to applaud the chief for doing this, that he tries to look and see where we can take items off the bid list. Instead of creating specialty unique things, you generally pay for those specialty and unique items. So I appreciate him doing that. He did go through that process, and he did receive a bid in the amount of $330,112. Just underneath the bid amount, the budget amount, and the bid is from Specialty Vehicles out of North Attleboro, and again, the amount was $330,112.
So anyone have any discussion? Larry?
No, none for me.
Michael? Ed?
I guess my only comment is looking at all the material in the, that's provided in the packet. It's rather exhaustive, and the extensive pages of shop notes on the size of each individual compartment, I think, is probably more than
Well, we've had problems with not having.
Yeah, one of the things, just to that point, and we can put a summary in, and then I can have those specs with me, and then if individual board members want to look at those specs, so we can try to reduce the 292 pages.
Mhm.
because, you have all this detail, and no place at the beginning of it is there just an oversheet from you or the chief explaining in a paragraph what the item is.
Yes, we actually, one of the things we're looking at is to create a narrative to have that.
Right, and then bring
It is still a
the
working
materials in a binder.
process.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, no, and I mean, I think that we're making progress, the checklist that Evan's created, and then if anyone has specific questions and we have the binder accessible, that should be sufficient. But to your point, it is, that's helpful information.
And in
so.
case people, are concerned, we are trading in a vehicle, so we're not gonna increase the net number of ambulances available to us if
Right.
we want to trade it in.
Right. Okay, Dawn? No. Okay, can you get a motion?
I move that we accept the contract for Specialty Vehicles Incorporated at the amount of $334,112 at the recommendation of the fire chief.
No, it's the 3:30.
The net is 330.
Oh, 330, okay.
4,000 includes the trade-in.
Got it, okay,
Yeah.
330,112.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just as a side question, in saying that, are we down with ambulance now because of the
There was
accident?
an ambulance that was in an accident, so we're in the process of getting that repaired, but Chief has probably a better.
Mark Clark, Fire Chief. Yes, we're down in the ambulance. Unfortunately, the vehicle was struck by a car, as the news agencies have reported. The subject was arrested, but yes, that ambulance will be out of service for about a month.
Okay. What happens? You rely on neighboring towns to help out then?
Well,
Is that-
yes, we do. Today was an example. We needed more than the 4 we normally have. One time we needed about 6. So yes, that will impact our operation. But we work with a body shop in Yarmouth who does very familiar with emergency vehicles and is on it, and we'll get that vehicle back to us as soon as possible.
All right, thank you, Noel. Okay, so no further discussion,
Nope.
so we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, on to approving the renewal application for 2018 hawkers and peddlers and weekday entertainment licenses by Salt Block Food Truck to be located at 575 Route 28, Harwich Port. Okay. Any questions on
No.
Michael?
Nope.
Ed?
No.
Don? No.
Okay.
So I think the only thing we want to make sure that people understand here is that where this is going to be located, the parking over by Heather's Hairport is Heather's private parking. So we want to make sure that in accessing the food truck, people are not using her parking lot to park there, so. Okay, can I get a motion?
I'll move that we approve the application for one-day wine and malt license by, oh, that's the
No.
wrong
No,
one.
no.
Approve the renewal application for 2018 hawkers and peddlers and weekday entertainment licensed by Salt Block Food Truck to be located at 575 Route 28, Harwich Port.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approve the application for one-day wine and malt license by Harwich Cranberry Festival for summer concert series at Harwich Cultural Center on July 12th, 19th, 26th, and August 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd.
Madam Chair, as I apparently have an interest in this application, I'll be recusing myself.
Okay, any discussion? Don?
As I've said in the past, my only objection to these things has been that they show up on consent order, and it's apparent what they're doing. They're gonna hire professional bartenders, and I'm satisfied that they're gonna be able to follow, the law in pouring.
Okay. Mike?
No, I'm just reading through it. Is there a stop time to this?
I think it's,
9 o'clock.
yeah, 9. Or even
Nine.
9
8.
is.
We plan to.
Can you go up to the mic? Thanks.
The plan is for the concerts to end by 9 o'clock, so that would be the stop time.
Stop time, right.
We won't be having an after party.
And the commence time would be 6?
Commence time, basically 6 to 9. We're going to open the gates at 5:45, music at 6:30.
All right, great. Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, can I get a motion?
Sure. With that, I move we approve the, for Harwich Cranberry Festival, the one-day special liquor license serving wine and beer, excuse me, at musical performances, sponsoring the summer at Harwich Cultural Center. The dates are July 12th, 19, 26th, August 2nd, 9, 16, 23rd. Run from the hours from 6 till 9 p.m.
5:45.
But, oh, yeah, well,
From 5:45?
Well, they said they were gonna open the gates till 6, but
Well,
5:45 to 9.
yeah. it's fine.
Second.
I'm not gonna quibble with 15 minutes.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
thank you.
Accept the donation from Harwich Cranberry
Yeah,
Festival.
and Bob, had more, excuse me, Madam
Oh,
Chair,
what?
Bob, you have more to say?
Oh.
No.
I think
No,
he's here for the
I'm
next-
waiting
he's here for the
because
next
I
one.
assume there'll be a question about the next item, so
Yeah,
I'm
right.
just waiting. And I'm very comfortable
Accept,
leaning on the podium.
accept the donation from the Harwich Cranberry Festival and Home Watch Companies for sprucing up the courtyard at the Harwich Cultural Center and occasional mowings. Any discussion?
Not for me.
Okay, Michael?
Nothing.
Don?
I move that we accept the donation from the Harwich Cranberry Festival and Home Watch Companies for sprucing up the courtyard in the Harwich Cultural Center with occasional mowings for the purposes of festivals.
No further discussion, all in favor?
I'll second that motion.
Oh, you didn't, I thought, oh, yeah, sorry.
Takes a second.
The only comment is thank you, Bob.
Yeah. For all of it, you guys do a fantastic job.
Please come and enjoy the
You t- Yeah,
We will.
okay, no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Request by Lynn, I'm gonna mess the name up, Schwein and Shout. Thank you, Schwein Shout, for temporary speed bumps on Seabreeze Avenue and Windmere Bluffs Road. Discussion?
Well, I think the letter writers are here, you may want to ask them.
Well, I think we'll let Chris talk. I didn't know
Okay.
if you had anything.
No,
you
no,
wanted
I'll
to
wait
say
until
about
Chris
it.
talks.
Yeah, just in terms of this, we did receive a petition from the residents in that area. The board did adopt, actually, I think it was my first 6 months on the job, a policy, and we're supposed to send to and receive information from the Traffic Safety Committee. And I do think that the material in this request should be reviewed, and the board should at least have that information from the Traffic Safety Committee. They have been apprised of this. I do appreciate the fire chief, police chief, and the DPW director commented, but the policy that the board has established is to set up this Traffic Safety Committee to solicit their input in terms of this recommendation. So I recognize what the DPW director had sent in, but I think it should formally go through that Traffic Safety Committee to get their official input.
Do you wanna?
No, I agree. It should be circulated to the other departments now. They have some input,
Right.
but that's vital. And, you know, this is a street, I know I've talked to some people that this is a big concern because they circle around and we're having problem. I'm sure we have problem in other beaches too with this big drop-off activity. So they make a quick run to drop off people and then run around, so there's traffic there. So we do need to look at what, I think one of the recommendations is to increase police and presence and signs. We'll see the recommendations of how they come back. And I just want to comment, on the other traffic safety, one existed one time before, we had numerous discussions of other, what do you call it, speed modifications?
Traffic safety or traffic calming solutions.
Traffic calming solutions. I would like to have some feedback on that too. Are there other options other than speed bumps that might do the same thing? You know, the berms going out and the other things going on.
And just, I realize I probably should have said that this isn't just about referring it to the Traffic Safety Committee. The police department is obviously aware of this. They got the same material, and if there is any enforcement or any, we have the electronic signs to record how fast people are going. So we will do enforcement, so I don't want people to think that nothing's gonna occur.
Right.
We can certainly do enforcement before the committee or while the committee is doing its work.
Yeah.
Just one other comment. I had one question. If if a resident sees someone speeding, should they call 911? And my response is no, call the police so you don't fire up, 911 specifically for emergency situations. So I hope I'm correct on that.
Yes, you are, sir. Yep. A speeding vehicle, unless it's actually struck something or someone, is really not an emergency. So you shouldn't use 911. The business line is perfectly acceptable, and it gets dispatched the same way. So that's correct.
Can you give us the business number? We'll put it somewhere.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean-
It's on the website.
It's on the website. Sorry.
508-430-7541.
Is that in your
I never
police
dial it,
description?
you see, that's what the problem is.
It's like your own cell number. Michael?
So I think this is a no-brainer. I'm not sure who in this room has spent on any time other than the neighbors that are here tonight. I've spent a fair amount of time down there. The town took that land in front of that last house and made that a loop. Those were both dead-end roads at one point. And if you spent any time down there at all, which our police department can't be cruising every road in Harwich looking for people speeding through small neighborhoods. But if you look at that neighborhood and the makeup of that neighborhood, it's a beach neighborhood. People are parking at CVS and walking down those roads. There's kids that live in most of those houses along there, and whether they're on the side of the road or not on the side of the road, you can't get two vehicles around that corner at the same time. This makes no sense to me whatsoever. And policies, we have a lot of policies. We're gonna talk about this until somebody gets hit. And there has been issues down there. And I think that I had a conversation with the fire chief about this, and I am reading his report and reading Lieutenant Consign's report. We have speed bumps in this town. Most of them are on private roads, but we also have speed bumps down at Red River Beach. I'm not sure what damage Link's talking about. And I don't know how long we want to study something before somebody gets hit by a car. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Ed?
policies are policies. I encourage the rest of the board and the town administrator, and maybe even the police chief, to go spend 5 hours down there on a Saturday in the summertime and see what I'm seeing.
Norm?
Yeah, if I might, what we want to prevent is being here saying, I wish we had done something. Because it's not if, it's when. That area, and I try and take a ride through there every single day. And I mean that literally, because this time of year, it turns into a very quiet area to almost city-like. There are thousands of people in that whole campground area, or from Air Lane to Allen's Harbor. And I do not want the board, in any shape or form, when you read my comments, I was supporting the highway director. I'm not a road engineer, and he had some concerns about speed bumps. But please do not take that as I'm not acknowledging a problem. There is a problem, and we are going to have a tragic accident there. We walked down there, my wife and I walked there, and it's a problem. And we have had many, many, many close calls. So I understand, I respect your Highway Safety Committee, but again, we don't have time to defer to certain committees. You have a really good police department here. They have a traffic safety division. I'm not going to speak for the chief. He knows I'm not going to speak for the chief. But we have the ability to watch out for these people better than we're doing, because we're going to have a problem.
Thank you.
If I may add one thing.
Okay, let me finish with Ed. Do you have any questions or
Well,
comments?
I've, in past involvements, watched communities come to grips with the issue of putting speed bumps or not putting speed bumps. And I've seen it done very successfully in other jurisdictions, and not necessarily only by doing temporary speed bumps, but doing larger, flatter, what are called, referred to as speed humps. They are easy, or much easier for public works equipment to clean and do road maintenance over. So I think there are a number of ways we could implement something like this, especially in these areas of that represent some possible horrendous accidents. I don't know how graphic you want me to get, but during our busy summer months, and I think we ought to try and come up with that plan and implement it quickly.
Don?
I agree with that. I mean, I hadn't thought about that, but Dennis uses those bigger, wider, longer speed deterrents. I do want to take the opportunity to say to the general public, I mean, it's not, it's certainly not to trivialize their particular circumstances on this road, but these speed signs are not a suggestion. They're the law. I live off the roundabout. It's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, if anybody ever were to do that. They come flying off there between 40 and 50. How do I know that? I used to teach driver's ed for 15 years, and I know how many feet per second that is. And I use telephone poles, much like the police do to guesstimate speed. We're at a point now where so many people are so disdainful. That would be off the Queen Anne area, which is 30 miles an hour, but not until after they get past my road. I've almost had the girl that we're raising mowed down, getting a school bus because of that. People have got to start thinking in terms, it's not about their personal aggrandizement, it's about, there's laws, there's going to be some tragedies here because we can't put speed deterrent bumps on every single road in town. At some point or another, people have to suck it up and take some responsibility for their actions. And they're clearly not doing that. Apparently, we are the window dressing for their vacation.
Michael?
I just wanted to add, I want to point out how many signatures are on this petition that we got, and that's the bulk of the neighborhood. They've also agreed to share in the cost or pay for this. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that we...
Well, you would like to speak? You have to come up to the microphone, yes.
Hi, I'm Lynn Swinesout. I live at 2 Seabreeze Ave. I've lived there for over 50 years. My grandchildren are 5th generation at 2 Seabreeze Avenue. And I can tell you that the traffic has gotten worse and worse and worse. And I just wanted to mention, as you said, Michael, everybody, really everybody on that loop has signed the petition. And that loop is really unique. We fondly call it the loop. It's Windermere Bluffs that turns into Seabreeze Avenue. It goes around in a circle. And it's unique, as somebody mentioned, it's the only street that goes parallel in front of the water, which, as you said, Mike, was taken by eminent domain many, many years ago. But that makes it unique, we feel. There are lots of other roads, lots of other neighborhoods. I don't feel that there is the same issue as we have on the loop. I live at the end in the Goldfish Bowl, and I'm forever holding my breath, as many of the neighbors are, seeing, kids riding their bikes, and kids will be kids, and cars coming around. And like you said, you can't carefully pass a car there without, especially if you're going fast. And people cut that corner. It's very, very dangerous. And I also would like to mention that the neighbors we've all purchased those little cute neon guys. And we even, Flags. And to no avail, cones to no avail. And then we took to putting slow down on the street in bright red to facing the property, I guess. But it really hasn't made any difference. But so I just wanted to add that. And we really appreciate your consideration and hope that something will be done sooner rather than later. I know, why not set a precedent and raise the level of safety in the community?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chris, the Traffic Safety Committee can convene
Yes,
immediately.
on an as-needed basis.
Right.
And just to be clear, I was in the town of Wellesley for 7 years, and one of my responsibilities was traffic. So I learned a lot about traffic. Definitely speed humps have an impact. I put some in myself, so I get that. I think here, I think this is good, because now I get the sense that, it's a high priority for the board, and it will be treated as a high priority. And when we had the consideration for the other roundabout off of, the name of the street's not coming to me, we had traffic experts come out. We actually cleared vegetation. We looked at restriping. We did a lot before we still have on the capital plan to do a roundabout. So, I'm glad the chief is in the audience, both chiefs are in the audience, because they're hearing what I'm hearing. So we will look to see Pleasant Bay Road.
Pleasant Bay Road, right.
So, we looked at that, and we've made improvements before we had to get, and we've had good results, but we've done it deliberately.
Right.
And I would just ask I get it, something will be done this summer. We won't wait. But I would like to have an opportunity to see what we're able to do on the short term and bring something back to the board.
Ed, did you have some follow-up?
Well, yeah, just, in reading the DPW director's comments, his concern is with temporary bumps, the anchors, in the cold weather working up. But on a short term, the temporary bumps could be installed, and then after looking at the issue of potentially then that area of the roadway can be redone over with a more permanent speed hump that would cover over the area that had been, the temporary anchors had been put in, so that they don't continue to be a problem.
Yeah, I think we have a committee that ultimately we do look to our committees to give us advice. That's why we have them. So I think that it may be worthwhile to at least involve them in the conversation.
Well, I think, if I may add, Michael's about ready to make a motion. I just trying to influence Michael and you know, speed bumps or humps. Give some a little bit of leeway on that, but do it immediately, and then come back later on and do more of a study, would be my only comment.
Michael?
So, I appreciate what you're saying, but this is a matter of public safety, and we are the Board of Selectmen, and Chris works for us. We make the policies, so I would respectfully disagree that we should take another 2 weeks to bring this back and be in the middle of July before we approve a request that could save somebody's life. We've got a petition signed by the whole neighborhood. There is a problem down here. The majority of the board has recognized there's a problem down there. And having more conversation about this, to me, is a waste of time.
Motion. So,
Traffic
Did
committee
you
or no
wanna speak?
traffic
I would
committee.
like to speak. My name is Connie Young, and I also live 17 Seabreeze Ave. And what the neighbors are really looking for is we are not looking for permanent, what do we call them? Speed bumps. We just want something there temporary through the summer months that we can provide the safety for all of the children that are there. We have handicapped people that come up there and sit at the landing, and it's really an issue. And we've tried everything as neighbors, and we have jumped out of our driveways to yell at someone to slow down. And do you think they care? They don't. So this is really something that's very important, and we as the neighbors are willing to spend the money if you would approve just a temporary for those months, because once August comes, it's empty. There's no one there. But come next week, we've already been filled with people. So I really ask you to listen to us. We care about our children. We care about our neighborhood. And it's up to you to help us.
Do you want to make a motion?
I do. I'd like to make a motion to approve the request by Lynn Schweinjout for temporary speed bumps on Seabreeze, speed humps on Seabreeze Avenue and Windermere Bluffs, and instruct the town administrator to get it done.
I second it, with the, I guess, a caveat, if you will, that this will lead us into a permanent solution as we get into the winter months and have time. I hope that's,
Further discussion?
Is that
Don?
part of the motion?
is that, would you accept that, Michael, as
I
part of
will.
the?
Don?
If that's part of the motion, I would agree, but I respectfully disagree with part of what you said. The speed limit's still gonna be the speed limit even in the off-season. People need to be able to go less.
It's not as busy as
You
the
have-
off-season.
In order to speak, you'd have to come to, but I think we've addressed the situation at this point, so.
Irrespective of that, there's a whole bunch of these speed
Hold on.
humps in North Dennis that are there permanently. If it's worthwhile to keep the vehicular traffic at a certain speed limit or less for public safety, it should be all year round, because these temporary ones have a tendency to erupt in the freeze-thaw cycle in the wintertime, and they are clearly just a temporary solution. The speed bumps are almost impossible to plow. We tried them on Route 124 for a period of time before we put stop signs and then eventually signalization in, and they just got plowed away. So ultimately, the humps provide a deterrent for people driving, because you really can't race over those things. I've been over them. But they also are plowable, they're durable, and they last. So it really needs to be a recognition that the speed limit's the speed limit regardless of how many cars are around.
Just a second. My name is John Young, live at 17 Seabreeze Avenue. I just wanted to inform mainly the police chief and the board, there was an original speed limit up there of 30 miles an hour. Now, I think Lincoln Hooper, bless his soul, when I talked to him 5 years ago, shook his head, couldn't believe it. I also called the traffic safety officer, whoever it was at the time, who said they couldn't do much about it. It was state controlled. I think Lincoln made it disappear. Now there's a sign that says thickly settled. But originally it was 30 miles an hour, the same as Queen Anne Road. That is the most ridiculous thing in the world. So your idea, we need to put speed limits, that's okay. Put the right ones, but put the speed bumps in because it just won't work otherwise.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, I'm gonna use a graphic that I use with all the students through the years, and the chief's gonna understand this. 30 miles an hour is 44 feet a second. It's about 4 car lengths, maybe 5, maybe 3.5 car lengths per second. It takes you 2 seconds to react and put your brakes on. That doesn't stop you. That just begins the process of stopping you. So even 30 miles an hour is colossally fast if you think of it in terms of feet instead of in terms of miles per hour.
Chief, yeah, sure, go ahead.
You know, believe me, I tremendously respect the concern of all the neighbors. I did drive down through that area myself as soon as I saw the letter come in from the neighborhood, and I had a discussion with Lieutenant Considine about speed bumps and whether or not we've done it before in town, and if there was anything else. You know, what I think my approach to it was at the time was, is there anything else we can do, like increase presence, signage, et cetera, that would fix the situation without doing, it seems like a speed bump should be almost like the last measure that's taken. So, but, you know, hearing the concerns and knowing the entire neighborhood has signed off on, you know, Michael, I haven't been down there in the busy summer weekends. I should definitely go and observe it, that's true. And one of the things I was thinking also as we're discussing this, are you saying 2 cars can't pass in the same direction? Has there ever been any consideration of making it a one-way street? That would provide more leeway on either side of the road. So, you know, these are things that traffic safety committees and engineers can sometimes mention that maybe nobody's ever thought of. But there is no question, and believe me, I understand it, those temporary bumps will remove your exhaust system if you go over them too fast. So it will definitely slow people down, and we are in support of slowing people down. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes there are other options, and I think that's the only thing that these, you know, these committees exist for, is to give us some other options. And we do have a representative from our traffic unit on the Traffic Safety Committee, just so everybody is aware. And, you know, I think this year, it's one of my goals to you know, try and streamline the whole process as far as speed bump requests, crosswalks, you know, speed limits, et cetera. It's an issue all over town, but this one definitely seems to be extreme. And if there is that level of concern, then obviously we're in support of anything that would slow the traffic down for you folks in that area. So.
Thank you, Chief. I think that's one thing we want to, as a board, we all take the safety of families, children, everybody, everyone in town very seriously, and I think we have a lot of areas that we have this issue, and to Dawn's point about people not respecting speed limits is our biggest problem. So I thank you, Chief, I thank you, all of you, and we respect the fact that so many of you have signed that, so I don't want that to be lost in this conversation. I hope you understand that. So, Ed?
Yeah, if the police chief could answer a few questions. A couple of the different signs have been mentioned. Is there a speed limit attached to the sign, thickly settled or rural area?
Yeah, by statute, thickly settled as the gentleman said, it's 30 miles an hour. Okay. Now, I am aware that there was a recent law change. I'd have to double check it. It does allow a municipality to reduce a speed limit lower than that on roads such as this. It would probably be appropriate. But again, you know, the speed limit is only the speed limit. It is not something that's going to physically slow vehicles down.
Yeah.
So, and there's limited choices in that.
I had a driver safety teacher explain once that the speed limit is there for when there's a police car around.
Right. But, and again, difficult, even if we did drop.
But I guess what's the lower limit that the town has the ability to reduce speed limits?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, go ahead.
Just to that point, there's a couple things. I think as the chief has alluded to, you know, when you have thickly settled, there's an implied 30 mile an hour. There is a federal standard that all states and communities have to follow, which is it's a MUTCD, Universal Manual of Traffic Control Devices, in that, if they call it, I think it's the 85th percentile rule, that they do a speed study, and if 85% of the cars do 30 miles an hour, then you can post that at 30 miles an hour. So there is an element to that. There was, actually, I think it was this past year, a law change that does allow for a community to set its own speed limit outside of that federal standard, which is something that maybe this is a good candidate to look at. So to the answer to that question, there is a process and a new law change that we can potentially use to our advantage. I would like, just in terms of expediting, if the community is interested, the residents are interested, it may be helpful if the board were to accept any grant or any donations, so that way we can expedite the purchase of it. We do have to follow certain processes, maybe time delays that maybe don't have to be necessarily followed by a donation. So I would ask that the motion include a donation from the neighborhood of those.
I'll add that to my motion and accept a donation from the neighborhood.
Then I'll second it. I second
It's
it.
temporary speed bumps until a permanent solution is found with collection of.
Right.
And if I may, Julie, just to the police chief's comments, thank you. It's just, this is an immediate solution to an immediate problem. Certainly, I would go along with traffic safety, but we have another agenda item tonight that we've been talking about for 2.5 years, and I think 15 years before me. So I'd just as soon get something done now and then study it, rather than study it and talk about it for the next couple of years.
Ed?
And just to be clear, I'm assuming that the neighborhood is donating the physical equipment and
We would do the installation, because
installed by
it's a
the.
public way.
Okay, so, no, any further discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Annual committee board reappointments for approval? Don?
I move we accept the list that was included in the packet with two exceptions. The 2/3 of the way down on page 1, actually 3/4 of the way down, David Nixon, that's an ex officio position in community preservation. There are a number that you're not seeing here, but we have received no recommendations from any of the committees that would make ex officio recommendations, and we do not actually create our own appointments. We act upon recommendations. So I'm pulling his. 4 others were already pulled. And on the second page, 2/3 of the way down, there's Mark Koopman, who needs to be pulled also. I've been informed by Tom Caruso that he's sending a letter in. He currently does not show up at meetings at all, and there'd be no point in reappointing him until we can resolve that. But with that, I move that we accept the list as contained in the packet.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, committee liaison assignments. So you all received the assignments in your packet, and if there's anybody who has any particular committee or whatever that they have an interest in that would like to switch, feel free to have that conversation.
Did you go over the miscellaneous reappointments?
Oh, did we not? I thought we touched.
The reappointments
Oh,
we
sorry,
just
I
did.
missed the
Sorry.
annual committee board appointments we did, sorry, annual miscellaneous appointments for approval, Dawn.
Yeah, I move that we accept the list as contained in the packet for the 2018-2019 miscellaneous reappointments.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on to the committee, thank you, Chris. Committee liaison assignments. Michael?
I move that we accept the committee liaison assignments as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Only that you have me as a clerk yet.
Oh, you still, that was changed, I changed that.
You're the honorary
To be
clerk.
clear, I did change that. Sharon?
Hi,
Hi.
Sharon Flieger. I just want to tell you that it's not the wastewater implementation committee anymore.
Oh, yeah,
That's why I support
that's
board
right,
meeting.
change it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't know if that would matter after it was voted in or not.
No, thank you.
Okay.
So, will we vote it with those 2 changes?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have a second, right?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, we pulled move the farmer's market for the reasons I discussed earlier, but I'll say it again, is that we had a misunderstanding in terms of adding this to the agenda, and neither party, Brooks or the Agricultural Commission, has a desire to move it, so it's.
I do think just the intent of what I thought the board was trying to commence the discussion on was, right now, it's an outdoor market. And if there was any interest in doing it for a longer season and take advantage of using some of the cultural center, that I think is kind of what the board was looking for. Not necessarily a usurpation of what they're currently doing, but is there a way that we can partner up more and extend that benefit to the community for a longer period of time? So just.
Well, yeah, I think there were two, I think there were two trains of thought on that. I think there was one about moving it for safety reasons and parking, as it was requested, and then I think, to your point, there's a further discussion, so maybe that part of the discussion, you know, should continue, and maybe there is a desire for that, so we can revisit that.
And if there is, people are more than welcome to contact me, or certainly Carolyn deals with a lot of folks directly.
Because those are two very separate discussions.
Right, they're very separate, very different ideas, so, okay. Acceptance of the deed for 31 and 33 Lakeview Drive. Chris, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, this one was a town meeting warrant article. We have concluded the elements of it. I met with the lady today. As the board may recall, when it came before the town meeting, there was an elderly lady. I think it's safe to call her elderly. She's, I think, 91 years old. So she came in, and she finds herself in a little bit of a difficult financial strait. So she sold her house, and she had two other pieces of property that both on Lakeview Drive, and she had the value of those probably in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. The back taxes owed on each was about $25,000. So there was no real way for her to sell it. Town meeting, and certainly this board, listened to her pleas and did decide there is a statute that allows for a board to accept property in lieu of the taxes, and then the taxes get written off. So she did come in today, KP Law put together the deed, and she came in today and she signed on her behalf, and I would just ask the board to sign, and then we'll get it officially posted.
Okay. Ed, do you have a comment?
No, I just make a motion.
Okay.
Move that we accept the deed in lieu of foreclosure for 31 and 33 Lakeview Drive.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Do we have a notary available?
Actually, Ann said that because she watches the videos, that she was comfortable notarizing. She was with me today when the lady signed it, so she witnessed the signing.
Okay.
But I think where we have a recorded meeting and she's the clerk, she believes that what you sign is you guys.
Okay. Okay. Public Beach
Very
22
open-minded of her.
agreement status. Chris?
So, I will get started on this. It has been a long time. There's very little doubt. One of the issues that, in regards to Public Beach 22, the town did reach agreement that we would not post it as a public beach, that we would put up some signage. And the issue really came up that the property owners on either side, there's a 40-foot easement. The property owners on either side don't own to the water, they own short of the water. And the town owns two parcels that are in that area. As time has gone, this certainly, and I did provide some of this information in the material, as time has gone on, the beach has either accreted or has had erosion. And in this section of beach, when we put the markers out for where that boundary line is, that they are going to be, and we kind of knew this, we're going to be underwater for a good portion of the tide cycle. They may be out of the water for the low tide and certainly the lowest of the low tide. But in essence, the markers are in the water. One would think that that would be fairly simple to just go in and put bounds in. We could do that. The surveyor, town surveyor, who I think has had a lot of angst over this, went down and did look at it. What he can do without having to get Article 91, not Article 91, Chapter
Chapter
91
91, right.
permit is to put in 30-inch concrete bounds, that about 26 inches of it would be in the sand and then 4 inches above. And I know in some of my conversations that there was a real concern that that would create a trip hazard to folks and potentially could be harmful and not really accomplish what would be accomplished. We had some discussion about installing concrete piers or putting in pilings to do that. Anytime you do work in the water, I need the Chapter 91 license in order to accomplish that. So in going out and looking at it, we did get survey stakes put in. 2 of the survey stakes when I was down there, which is probably mid-tide level, were in the water. The only ones that you could see were outside of the water on town property, but there's very limited town property in that area, and that certainly that 40-foot easement is very limited. So really, I did go down with a few people. Actually, Evan came down with me. I did bump into one of the property owners on the other side, Mr. Morris, and I asked him, I said, well, could we put a marker above the high tide line on your property, so at least we get the line of where town property is, so you can sight down. I know one of the concerns was being able to sight down the beach. And he basically, in a nice way, said no. He goes, if you're gonna put any signage up, I want you to put them on the easement. Which, to be perfectly honest, I think is certainly within his rights to make that request of us. So I brought Mr. Hooper down there the other day. We could put some signs at the end. There are 2 little fences that designate the easement. And at the end of those fences, we could put some signage in, that roadway signs, if you would, that say edge of easement, and it's 65 feet to the water from that point, or 65 feet to town property from that point. So I don't think it accomplishes being able to sight down to see where the beach is. I think the long and the short of it is, for most of the time, access to the town-owned land is gonna be underwater. And that raises an issue. So the second part to the memo that I did submit to the board, I can get those signs up and do those in fairly short order, so we can have that. It will say 65 feet to town property. The second would be to produce a map that certainly we can share with the neighbors that show that because that 65 feet brings you into the water, and the way to access the town property on either side that's still available, that's not underwater, is to walk over groins that are, quite honestly, a hazard. They're underwater for a good portion. So the idea would be to put together a flyer or information packet that encourages people to go to the 2 beaches, public beaches that are owned by the town. And if you want to walk on that along the water, some of that is going to be town property, or certainly people under the colonial ordinances could walk over some of that for specific purposes. But I think that the point of showing people where the beach is so limited of a beach that that's not really a realistic access point. So I think that's something that we can accomplish in fairly short order by having DPW do it. If the markers have to go into the water, then it's going to be a process.
Okay, discussion? Don?
I'm just really not in favor of putting markers in the water with concrete anchors, because ultimately, we put them there, it's a tort claim waiting to happen. Somebody's gonna walk into them and bump into them, and I'm not sure that they're even necessary. If people are informed by a bound at the high tide mark, 40 feet further, as you cite it, is also still part of that situation. I just don't like putting the town in a position where it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. I mean, especially given the fact that I'm not even sure that the neighbors all agree with each other on this particular instance.
Okay.
As you laugh, I happen to know some of the neighbors on Shore Road, so.
I'm laughing.
No, we're not laughing, we're just laughing because
Clearly
there's
they don't
disagreement.
Ed?
I think, the 2 little fences at the roadway, I think that's probably about as good of delineation as we want to do.
Michael?
Yes.
So groin was the term I was looking for today, was groin, not jetty. Mark and I spoke about this today. Chris, the agreement that we made with the attorney in the meeting last year after we agreed that we would bound the property line, I believe our responsibility is only to put a bound at the end of the easement. The neighbors suggested that they would put a bound on the far end of their property so that there was a line of sight, which in my mind certainly would take the liability off of us.
Yeah, Mr. Morris was unwilling to do that. He happened to meet us out there. I have not had that discussion with Mr. Fitzpatrick. If he's willing to do that, then that's something we could look at.
So that's 50-50. My interpretation of the surveying laws is not the same as yours, that Chapter 91 license for survey stakes or for survey purposes is not required. And I believe Amy...
That's what I said. I thought I said, but the survey stake is only the 30-inch bound.
That's defined in the law, because I couldn't find that in the law.
Well, my town surveyor told me that, so
I'd like to verify that. Lastly, when I went down there and looked at it, the property line falls on the jetty, or the groin, whatever we want to call it today, on the far side of that property, right?
No.
It's right on.
It's 15 feet shy, I think is what, he has it in the plan that I provided.
Paul,
it's not right on the boundary.
My understanding was Paul put this stake 15 feet away from it because that was what was convenient, but the actual property line, and you guys,
yes,
both you and
yes,
Aaron had mentioned that people would have to go over the jetty.
Yes.
So that would put the property line at the jetty.
Yeah, that's, you're correct. The stake that he located was on the town property that was accessible.
Right, which was about 15 feet from the actual property line.
Correct.
So if it is the edge of the jetty, and we're talking about trip hazards,
yes,
you're gonna trip over a rock at the edge of the jetty if you put a line of sight. And my whole point to the line of sight is simply to give our police chief something to look at rather than send an officer down a boardwalk to a property line and look across at who knows what and not be able to tell people to move. And really, this argument now is, you proved, we proved, and to the angst, I think, of the neighbors, those lots all came with a hard bound. They owned their property. So what they want to stake with on the far side of their property, on their property, is their business and their liability. Ours, if we do it on the property line at the end of the boardwalk, would not be in the water, correct?
that's correct.
So my suggestion is you meet with their attorney, because the whole point, my whole point on this is, we were supposed to have this done mid-April, early May, before the season started. Again, now we're almost to July, and we don't have it done. And I see no reason to enter into another lawsuit with the people that own this property when we've already proven that they own the property. We don't have a fight. So I just don't understand why we're not proceeding.
But we're not entering into another lawsuit, are we?
Not
We're
yet.
just talking about the, and I think there may be some distinction between survey markings and the concrete post, which is more permanent. And I think that does, anything permanent in the water would cause you to have to go to Chapter 91, you know, regardless. I think but otherwise I agree with that, but, you know, to make it easy for the police. What I've been told too is we could make it better. I think there's some fencing there now, the snow fencing and stuff that's falling apart. And as I recall, that should look good. It's town easement, we should fix that. And as I recall, Amy's not here now, but part of the reason that was suggested a few years ago was to help minimize the movement of the sand. To stabilize that beach.
That's right.
So if we have them there for that, they should be in good shape. There's also a walkway there that I understand needs to be repaired and cleaned up, so it looks good. So I think the town, if we're going to keep track of that easement, we need to be sure we maintain it.
Do you want to state your
Yes,
name?
Mark McGowan, Rabbit Run, West Harwich. I just wanted to kind of go on record. Mike and I did have a little conversation earlier. There seemed to be dropping of the ball last fall, because last fall we had talked about pushing it through and trying to get some latitude with the state, either DEP or getting some legislation thrown through that we could then fill and try to reclaim these 3 lots. Chris, it's not 2 lots, it's 3 lots actually. And that the harbor master was formulating some
type of a letter or whatever, but the wording wasn't right, ended up coming back to him, and somehow that's all been kind of vanished. It lost steam and kind of got pushed to the rear.
Yeah, no, just to that point, one of the things that the town was engaged in is we have several permits to do beach renourishment throughout the community. We had an opportunity, which we have been exploring, and we are in the process of about ready to receive approval, and that was to actually do renourishment throughout the community under one permit. So instead of every 5 years doing multiple, we could do one for every 10 years. In that process, we John Rendon and myself, we had all town beaches, which would have included this. And there was concern raised validly that there was an agreement that said the town would not pursue beach nourishment at this location. So we did amend that permit to not put in for beach nourishment at that location, pursuant to what the board reached an agreement on. And in conversation, you know, I have double-checked or updated myself on some of the material. That is a valid agreement that's on file, so there is an obligation for us to follow that. So that permit has been not altered, but was changed to reflect that element in the agreement.
That's very interesting that you put it in that format, because I thought the agreement was that they didn't want any sand that was going to come onto their property. Not that the fact is that we weren't going to try to resurrect and reclaim the lots that were given to the town by the Chase family and was supposed to be maintained by the town as beaches for the public use. And I'll tell you, not this body here, but going back in time, these selectmen have failed in their duties. And it's about time that finally maybe this group turns around and stands up and says to the state, hey, we screwed up. Is there any allowance so that we can reclaim some beaches? And this is for the public. This isn't for one or two individuals. This is for the public, general public use. That's what eminent domain is all about too.
Okay, so I think that ultimately going back to the conversation that we're talking about with the markers and what we're proposing to do and what we're allowed to do versus the agreement that we have, that this board has to review, is the 2013 agreement. We don't have anything from a meeting beyond that. So we have the agreement from 2013 signed by Attorney Vieira and Michael Ford. Attorney Ford. And that's what we, as a board, have to go on. So any agreement or people wanting to put markers, survey markers in the water on their own property becomes their own thing. The town is agreeing to say that we will put these, to note the easement and the signage to show for that same purpose, as if the police are called or whatever, to go 65 feet, is it? I think 60 or 65 feet out. And putting something in the water does create a liability for the town. Over the long term, none of us know what could happen down there, right? I mean, someday it could be, 10 feet high. And those pilings or markers in the water represent a hazard. I personally know someone who dove in to a very flat lake, hit it directly in the middle of the head, and was paralyzed for life. So I do know that stuff happens.
Oh, no, the thing is, and I'm in agreement with what we're talking about
right,
with those. But what I'm basically trying to go on to record, because Mike and I had a conversation earlier, that I want to see this board continue and try to do something in the way of resurrecting these 3 lots. And the fact is that, yes, you have 2 neighbors that don't want any sand on their beach. So be it, okay? But the fact is that it was my understanding last fall that the fact is that you folks were going to try to put something through and try to work with the state in getting this done. Now, the fact is, this has been years, way before you've been on the board, okay?
I understand that.
So that's why I'm saying is that, this changing of the guard, and all of a sudden, oh God, we forgot, we sweep it back under the rug, and we go on with things. Well, we've been, how many years? I mean, So the fact is that it's driving me nuts because we get up here and we hammer and hammer and hammer it away, and we basically, as I said, changing the guards, you guys change, and we back up here again, same thing.
So I appreciate your frustration, and I understand that many people, because we've had many people come to the meetings and explain how long they've been going there, and I appreciate that, the whole board appreciates that. And I
But-
think previous boards did too. I
Right.
think for us, we have the 2013 agreement that we're bound by, no pun
That's fine.
intended.
But again, you're letting two people control the public.
Okay, so I'm gonna just end it here because we had this conversation multiple times.
Can I just make an, well, Michael has his hand up first, and I'd like to
Michael?
make one
If I
point.
may, I did suggest to Mark in our conversation today that he puts a letter together with his recollection so that we could discuss it as a separate item, knowing we weren't here to talk about anything besides the bounds. So I hope that you do that.
I will do that,
Right.
but I just wanted to, tonight to go on record,
Right.
because the fact is that it's frustrating as all hell, is that we just not getting anywhere. We are absolutely going backwards, and the fact is that there was kind of some promise that this movement, at least trying to see if the state has any type of variance or that we can,
Well,
get-
I think that we're kind of getting off course, because right now we're bound by the 2013 agreement, and that's what we have to deal with in terms of any further discussion about what we can do.
That
The
has
other
nothing-
part of this agreement is that we were not going to advertise it as a public
Public
beach in the town, and that's another stipulation.
And that's a shame, because
In
it's a public beach.
But I understand, but that's part of the agreement, and that's what the board.
It was ridiculous who
Okay,
cut the
so thank you.
So my other point to that was, you're speaking about the 2013 agreement. Chris and I sat in a meeting with the attorneys last year, and the agreement was we would bound the property, our part of the property. At the end of the boardwalk, there would be a bound put in, correct, Chris?
Yeah, but what we're being advised is that putting it underwater.
So at the end of the boardwalk, it's underwater?
Yes.
Yes, so that's the point, is that underwater, it represents a liability and a hazard. Ed?
Well, having been on the board in 2013 when that all happened, I'm very aware of that. This agreement that was made, is there a document that the board voted on?
Yeah, yes, there is.
Yes,
Okay.
we have the document.
I haven't seen it.
That's the
Could you-
2013, it's in your
We got it.
packet.
It's in our packet.
Right.
Let
And
me,
that's the agreement we
I'm
have.
going through it right. It's not here.
It is.
It's in the,
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I,
Yes.
Mark, Mark, I just wanted to talk about discussions before, because I think as Ed and I were on those selectmen boards before, and as I recall, and I want to just mention this, because if you write a letter, we have to explore this again. As I recall, we weren't the only limiting factor in this discussion. The other limiting factor is reluctance, as we understand it, with the weather and the other regulations, of allowing a beach to be nourished underwater.
Correct.
And that, at the present time, is, I think, I haven't looked at this for a couple of years, is not allowed. And so we have to find a way to, and I think you're suggesting go back and fight that regulation.
So-
But
Hold on.
But let me
So-
finish, but, well,
Well, yeah, hold on though. So you finish,
okay.
and there's another gentleman who'd like to speak.
Well, I'm about done. I'm just saying that, just for the record, it was more complicated than just a selectmen's. It was somehow, and if you're gonna write a letter, you need to direct it to that aspect, is try to figure out, we need to change the regulations right now for that to happen.
And that's what I was talking about, because last fall, that was what was in the it was the lineup. In other words, and there was, because it came back from, because the harbor master had
Okay.
put something together.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna end this conversation. Chris, go ahead.
Just if I can, I think what we're talking about this evening, and I do want to get to the point because I know my words are being used, but in terms of tonight, at the end of the 40-foot easement, where the town property commences, is underwater, so we cannot put the markers in. So we will put the markers, what's being recommended is put the markers above the high tide mark, so that way they always stay out of the water, and to direct people how far it is until the town property. So that's what's being sought. in terms of the line of sight for town property, we would have to go along the beach and find areas where we're above the high tide,
Right.
that we could put those bounds in. We may have to go far afield to be able to do that. We could certainly look at doing that. I think for the short term, putting the street signs up would make the most sense to get done kind of immediately.
Right.
To the point of, he left the room, but to the point of the question, I had made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, or I did, it made a recommendation to the board that the policy for how we do beach renourishment is something that if the board wants to look at that the agreement does just cover that section of the 3 parcels that are owned. I was, well, in the permit, the Pleasant Street Beach actually accretes, and we have no legal ability to put on there because it's not in an erosion situation. So if we want to look at the policy of renourishment, which I think is where kind of Larry was going, in that general area to see, is there a way to renourish parts of town-owned property that are above the high tide line, because you can only renourish above the high tide line, that is something that the board could relook at that piece to see where does that make practical sense.
That makes sense.
But that is a separate
Yeah,
discussion.
Madam Chair, since we didn't agenda that, might I recommend we accept a motion from Michael about the bounds that we did post, and request that the chair place on the agenda this separate discussion about how we might approach this, and hopefully Mark will send his letter so that we have some data to operate off of. But I think we probably want to revisit the whole situation, but we're not posted to do that tonight.
Right, and we have to just have that further discussion about what that other piece of the agreement that talks about not advertising as a public beach. So, yes, I agree, we should have a further discussion about all of these pieces in terms of the beach, but we need
to
to
take some
establish,
action.
right, exactly. So, can I get Ed?
Well, I just reviewed through the supplemental packet, which is a new concept for me. Anyway, and found the 2013 document, but whatever agreement was made last year, there's nothing. Okay, if there was an agreement made, then could we write up a description of that?
I don't think there was an agreement that was made. I was requested to enforce the existing agreement that was in 13, which meant identifying those bounds.
Right, that's the agreement we have.
So it's just a
But we
matter
can
of
still bring back the
enforcement.
bigger
We
discussion.
can bring back
And
the
the
discussion.
renourishment
of
certainly is
so
valid.
So the board took no other action other than the 2013?
Asking for the agreement to be enforced.
We got a different board, and we can
Okay.
always look at this.
So can I get a motion?
Is there any reason to have a motion?
Do we?
Well,
Then we
just so
officially-
the board's aware, if there's no concern about the letter that I drafted, I'll proceed to put up the signage
Okay.
where we can on the easement. Where we can above the high tide line, we can put up temporary stakes in those areas that would be similar to what we have. And then we can put together an information sheet so those neighbors can be guided that are in that area, or summer rentals, they can be guided to go to the public beaches that are on either side of this.
Okay. Michael?
I
Oh, sorry.
I have a comment, but this gentleman's gonna
Yes,
stand.
yes, you've been,
So,
sorry.
Kevin O'Shea, 11 Rabbit Run. As you folks know, if you've been down there, there was some work done 3 or 4 years ago with some fencing to eliminate erosion. Now, you can walk from the jetties at Herring River all the way to Allen Harbor, and there won't be one other configuration like that. So why that one needed that, but that's history, right? Subsequent to that, there's been an extra piece of fence or two, split rail fence, that jets into the beach that really imposes on the seating down there. If you were down there, you saw it. I don't know what kind of erosion prevention a split rail fence is, but I would ask that as the town is looking at some of the engineering and the sight lines, to look at that section or two of split rail that juts off the original part configuration of snow and split rail fence, because that didn't occur till over this past winter. So it's a new piece or two, and not sure what the approval process was, but it's there. And while you're working on the rest of these issues, I'd be interested to see, how that got there and what it's doing for erosion prevention.
Yeah, we did that with them.
Thank you.
So I'd have an answer for you on that, if I may.
Sure.
May I?
Yeah.
That fence that you're talking about was permitted by the conservation agent, and the fence, and we had lengthy discussion about this last year at last year's meeting on this, is to keep people off the dune, because people are moving their beach chairs up into the dune. And where that fence sits is what we're talking about needs to be bounded now, because that's private property. So Mr. Fitzpatrick got a permit for that fence, put the fence in, approved by the conservation agent to keep people off the dune and moving their chairs up because it's private property. We talked about that lengthy last year.
And so there was some
Yes.
issue of people on the dunes?
Yes.
That, we did have lengthy discussion on that, and
And
Chris,
that section of property is private property, so
Okay.
that's not town property. There's only an
Right.
easement over it to allow passage over.
and that fence, I believe, if I recall correctly, was a remedy to a previous fence that,
No, they're two separate pieces.
Two
There's a
separate
fence
pieces.
that surrounds the dune and one that juts into the sand. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
And then moving on with this without a
Okay,
motion,
so-
Julie, I would ask that the town administrator meet with the attorneys for the Fitzpatricks before we do anything, because this is going to lead, this has been in court already. We spent a fair amount of taxpayer money. I believe Mr. Fitzpatrick is in disagreement, and if the rest of this board is okay with just approving it, what Chris is saying, and going back to court, I want to be on the record stating I'm completely against it.
Okay.
We'll put it up on Mr. Morris's side, because he indicated that he was okay with it. You can't
Right, I
put
mean-
signage up on private property.
Right, and,
But there's no harm running it by the attorney.
Yeah, I'm happy to call on that side. I'll have the other sign installed.
And I'm not sure what the value is in running it past Mr. Viera.
no, I don't either. I mean, we have an agreement, we're abiding by the agreement. That doesn't change the agreement. If they want, if they're looking for survey
Yeah.
markers or bounds, whatever way we want to refer to them, on their property, that's their thing,
So,
and they can't go above, and to your point, it will be their liability. And trying to get a Chapter 91 license to do anything more is gonna be very difficult for anybody, the town or them. So I think we need to abide by the agreement we have, move forward with what we're proposing, and the attorney, as long as we're sticking to our agreement, we wouldn't run it by him again.
And to that point, I did run that by our attorney to say, is this within the confines, and he didn't see an issue with that,
Right.
us putting those signs on, so.
Something like that.
Simply stating, Chris and I had a meeting with the attorneys. This is a very different discussion. It makes no sense to proceed, in my mind, saying that it's the agreement from 2013. Chris sat in the same room as I did last year. He heard the same conversation, whether he recollects it or not. We had an agreement on what we were gonna do. This is different. Makes no sense not to run it by him.
Well,
Whether
then-
we agree in the end or not, it makes no sense, Chris. You can
have
change
him-
it if you
can have
want,
him call
but-
me, I have no problem with
I
that.
mean, Don?
I understand the passion that Mr. McCaskill has here. The only
not
problem I
passion,
have
it's
is that
common sense.
there could be 5 people that recollect that discussion, but it goes back to the old saw about an oral contract isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
What?
If you have 5 people that recollect this, it's still not in writing. What we have in writing is in front of us. So I don't see the point in going back to their lawyer to gain a recollection about a conversation that wasn't codified by a written agreement. Whether it was voted by this board or not.
I mean, we have the agreement, that's all we have. So, I mean, we don't have anything written from any meeting, any different direction.
Record
From-
reflects my opinion. That's enough.
That's fine, so let's move on with this item, and is there any further discussion, or should Chris move ahead with what we've just discussed? Anybody? Can you give me direction to give to Chris?
I'll proceed. I don't think the board necessarily needs to take an action unless you want to say no to the action.
Okay, so we'll just go
I'll
on.
proceed on a
Michael's made his.
majority consensus, not a
I'll be a,
unanimous.
yeah, I'm a
Okay.
no on that consensus, Chris.
Okay. So,
Dishonesty.
now we are on to the sewer education, public outreach, communications coordinator for sewer project. Larry, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you. I asked for 2 items on the agenda tonight. The first one is the discussion briefly on wastewater, and the second one's on Cold Brook. But I started this discussion last meeting and then realized it was not properly on the agenda, so I'll start again. My issue and my proposal is we're embarking on a $25 million project, and that's huge. We're asking to educate a lot of neighbors. We did for town meeting. We need to continue that. I really have 2 issues. One is a communication coordinator, and the other is project management. But I'd like to focus tonight on communication coordinator, because we have a wastewater support committee. We have town staff working on this. We have questions, I guess, come to each of us as well, neighborhood meetings and things we've been to. But in my mind, what we're lacking is a unified and coordinated approach of how we're going to work with the community to communicate with them, as Don says, not only one-way street, but 2-way streets, get input. So we're listening to the neighborhoods, we're providing information, we're having someone coordinate that between our engineers, between town staff, and between the various concerns of the neighborhood, so we're sure that this goes ahead in a positive way, in an informed way. So my request, and I don't want to repeat too much what I said last time, but my request is that we move forward and work with the wastewater support committee and town staff, develop an RFP to look for a contract, not a full-time employee, but to hire contract help. So we have a lead coordinator to make sure we're moving forward in the way that's most acceptable to us, most educational and acceptable to our neighborhoods. I really want this project to move forward in a, well, let me say differently. As this goes forward, I want people to feel good about it. Not only because it's an important project, because it's phase 2 of 6. And we have a lot of other work to do. We have regionalization with Dennis and Harwich we need to do. And if we fail on this phase, we're in trouble going forward. And we know what failure could mean. We saw the newspaper article this week where they're suing Wishmere Harbor and Wacquasit for, which is in essence just a shot across the bow to remind all the other towns, keep moving. The article is also good because it said Harwich and Pleasant Bay, we're ahead of the game, so we got some positives on that. And I know, but in any case, that's enough said. I'll answer any questions you have, but that's my hope and that's my wish. I give support that we move ahead. And I'm calling this, and we go after, we search what's out there to give us some contract help to coordinate communication for all the reasons I've said.
Michael?
I support that.
I think I think that the past large project that we had in town this year was completely, it was a mess in my mind, and it kept coming back to us and coming back to us, and right now I don't see how this is gonna be any different, and I'd like somebody to be the point person on this.
Ed? Don?
As Larry alluded to, I'm very much in favor of this. I mean, I've actually sat in meetings before being a selectman again with CDM Smith essentially saying, what about this, don't you understand? I mean, I'm sure they're really good engineers, but there comes a time when you know so much about the details of a project that you start forgetting that other people don't know what you know. There's easements to the road that are still yet to come. I know Coastal sent out some letters that seem to indicate, you should get on it right now. And everybody who's private has that right to say, hey, I can provide you with this service. But it would be really nice to do this, and also understanding that it's not a slight on the town administrator. I don't expect him to be sitting in his office with a headset on saying Sewer Central and answering every phone call. It's not plausible. Everybody at this board has to make an appointment to get into his office. There's just not enough time for that to happen. And the committee would be well served to have a point person who's being paid to do just that. Listen to the concerns, bring them back and say, you know, you guys haven't thought about this. And also send out what we know to be true in a way that's absorbable by people so that they're not intimidated by this whole thing. Couldn't be a better idea.
So the other piece of this that I see is, I think this is an important piece in terms of community outreach and how we get the word out there. And to your point, there's many pieces of this puzzle that, you know, homeowners have to deal with. So there's that piece. There's also the piece that we have to think about, again, so that things go smoothly and we get the biggest bang for our buck too, is that, you know, our departments should be talking to each other. So we should be looking at how DPW is talking with water, is talking with, you know, with fire because of their new station, if there's any ability to improve utilities, et cetera. Never mind, you know, any other particular projects slated for town. So I think to your point about having somebody that's reaching out to the community but is aware of all the pieces that are playing over there, it's also, I think, a time that we should start looking at how we look at our departments and creating a sort of subcommittee that works together on this project. It wouldn't be a ton of time, I wouldn't imagine, but so that there's communication where if we're doing this particular piece of work, what else can we do? And I have brought up the fact that, you know, GIS has been important for the assessors, but it's certainly going to be vital for this project. So we need to improve our GIS. We need the water department to be looking at how quickly we can look at irrigation meters, because we absolutely have to have those. Because people who are going to be sewered are going to be paying sewer rates for that water that's watering their lawn, unless they have a well. So those are critical. The easements were the biggest, I think, one of the biggest hurdles that Chatham had. So the sooner we get on that, and you know, whatever way we develop that plan to get on those easements is going to be pivotal. So I think that we've got two pieces. To Larry's point about having somebody be the outreach person, be that contract person, get the word out, and not just the word out, but educate.
Right.
It's
And
two
listen.
pieces there.
And bring the word back.
But then there's the other piece that's interdepartmental that I think is critical as well. And I don't know if that person plays a part in that, but I think that interdepartmentally is critical.
Just a couple, you know, number one, I think we have been doing pretty well. I appreciate, and I think what I heard before from the board is that, you know, I think you're appreciative of the efforts that, you know, certainly we had a very favorable town meeting and so on, but I am one person and there's a lot to do. The thing on this one, I guess I'm looking for some guidance because Chatham doesn't have anything like this. I don't believe Barnstable has or Falmouth. So I just don't know where to start to how would we pick somebody like this, or who would be the skill set that we would need.
Let me, through you, Madam Chair, let me suggest, I wanted to bring this up tonight and hopefully get support. Let me suggest that then we'll work together with the support committee and you, Chris, and Evan to put together what we see as an RFP, what type of person and contract person, and we bring that back. So that we get input, then we have some guidance on what we want to do.
Okay.
I mean, in general, I want a coordinator pull all these pieces together. I don't think any of us are experts on public communication. You know, how to reach these people, how to get all the discussions in as we move forward. I think we can help move that along. And we can take, I agree, we've obviously done something right because we got it through town meeting.
Right.
But I don't want to stop there. I want to be sure we keep it going.
I guess one other piece of that, though, is we need to think about.
And just on the coordination piece, maybe one of the things I should do is, you know, I have meetings set up with the 6 landowners that we need to have pump stations with.
Yeah.
So I think I'll add into my my agenda item here under Town Administrator's Report, just an update to let people know. Because we do have KP Law is already working on all the private ways to get that determination. I have meetings set up with the 6 property owners for the pump station easements that we need. I have the draft language. So that is still commencing. I mean, obviously we have to do the project. I would say, and you know, certainly maybe on
the project where we did Muddy Creek, I mean, that was $6 million. We did a lot of that in-house. We did have an outside consultant that kind of helped us go through that. But I don't know if you remember it all, Larry, but that was probably $150,000 that consultant
Yeah,
ultimately
I'm
cost us
hoping
over
we'll
that.
be, keep below that, but I
But
still
just-
would say that, we need to explore it, and I still would say,
Yeah.
we're talking $25 million project, so.
But yeah, no, I'm happy to work with the committee and work with
I'll,
Larry
we'll work, and
to
I'll
see
bring it
what's
back
out
next
there.
meeting, if that's acceptable.
John?
Yeah, just in response to that, the Muddy Creek thing is one thing, except that it didn't require actions by people who lived in homes that were gonna have to have specifically sequenced things to occur. This is a different thing. This is like trying to coordinate a whole bunch of people who are out there who are gonna have to be obligated to hook into one thing that we're involved with. And we do need to have this coordinated because, I mean, we've had this discussion before. I mentioned that when I was with the federal government, they had scheduled contracts at least to show up, like the 5 or 10 or 15 people who you could contact with. We haven't taken an action in that area, and it's not that we're required to, but if we don't, we really need somebody who can tell people, okay, here's what you can do and when you can do it, and if anybody's having repetitive problems, like 8, 10, 12 residents, then you gotta assume that you got a problem that somehow we haven't addressed. So that's what the virtue of this position would be, is like, I'm never impressed by somebody saying, well, Chatham didn't do this and Barnstable didn't do this. Well, we have our own residents, we have our own responsibilities to our own residents, so if we can make it better for them, then we should try.
Ed, did you want to?
Well,
Yeah, I was gonna ask Sharon.
yeah.
Okay. Sharon?
Oh,
Go ahead.
hi, Sharon Kliger, wastewater. I like all the suggestions, and just to follow up with Julie, I do have a concern when you talk about the different department heads, possibly not really knowing or understanding what some of their responsibilities are of reporting. And I think these are included in the spreadsheet that I'm still looking at for people to be following. And I honestly do not know what has been done or what hasn't been done as far as that goes and as far as the reporting. To my recollection, there were things that needed to be reported on a yearly basis to the Cape Cod Commission. It's in our charge for the wastewater support committee, but we don't have access to the department heads or what is going on. And I think, I know Larry tries, but we're kind of like out of the loop. We're kind of sitting out there in no man's land, really not knowing what's going on, what's needed, what we're supposed to do. There's a little bit there with the monitoring of that spreadsheet. I'm still waiting to find out. It was going to be put on the website. I did send a copy of it to Dan Peltier. I haven't heard anything back. And what I'm saying is it's hard for this committee, as the Wastewater Support Committee, to move forward and do very much when we really don't know what's going on. So having a communication coordinator and a project manager, I think would be a tremendous asset to the town. And I really think with this type of project, it's more than this committee can handle, because we don't have the access, and we're not full-time people. The committee, I think, is great. We're willing to do what's ever necessary, but we don't even know sometimes what is necessary to be done. And we really don't know where this project is at as far as following up on that spreadsheet. And that does concern me, because I put it together. I know what some of those things are on there, and I really don't know where we are with that. So I think having somebody to help with some of this would be an asset. That's just my comment, that I think the suggestions are good.
Thank you, Sharon. Ed?
Yeah, well, some of the comments Sharon made are very good, and in looking at this, I guess the one position is clearly needed is something to describe something on the neighborhood of a public ombudsman, to work with the public to answer their questions on how it's going to affect them and their property and their neighborhood. The other thing, though, I think we really need, I mean, I think the town has to be very proud that over the life of this whole project, a lot of it's been done by volunteers, and a whole cadre of people doing everything from water sampling to being on the wastewater committee. You know, we were lucky to have someone like Frank Sampson to sort of guide us through it all. But you know, now that we're at the point of spending real money, it's, I think, a project that's large enough that it can no longer be done as part of a number of people's responsibility. You know, a part of Chris's, a part of Bob Caparelli's, a part of the water superintendent, a part of Link's. You know, it needs to have somebody in control of getting the system built and up and operating and turned over then to the eventual operating department. But to expect that we're going to get through this and do it well and do it efficiently and economically without somebody running it on the behalf of us, keeping us informed,
Right.
keeping all of the different aspects moving along at the clip they need to be moving along, so you don't get to the point of going, well, we're still 6 months out of getting appraisals done for easements.
Right.
You know, you don't want to be in that position.
So,
Larry, you would meet the committee?
Yeah, is that consensus, when I'll come back then?
yeah, and I think to Sharon's point, you know, we should be looking at that spreadsheet also. We should.
Yeah, just on the spreadsheet, Sharon did a tremendous amount of work. This is one where it was assigned to Charlene. She was working on it, and when Charlene left, it has been, until we recently hired, you know, another person, it hasn't been followed up on as well as we would like, so.
Okay.
So, yeah, that should be an agenda item,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
moving forward.
Okay, the next discussion I think will be short, but I asked for the code book to be put on, and because I just want to, there's been a lot of activity on this. I haven't been involved in it for some years. I actually was when I was selectman before, then I was off. I was actually disinvited to come to any more meetings, and so I didn't make any more. Not by you, Chris.
I was gonna say, I never disinvited anybody.
Not by you, but I was
Even Bill
told I
shows up.
wasn't welcomed after that. But we, if you look at the proposals that we have in our packet, we've gone through, you know, 2012, 2016, 2017, now 2018. And the point I want to make is because I know there's been negotiations on, but we originally, not originally, but this is part of our wastewater management plan. And I mentioned this at town meeting. That there are several reasons for doing this. One is environmental restoration, that's stated. But certainly an important one for us is reducing the number of lots we have to sewer. And there's enough lots that this could mean a $6 million savings on our when we begin to sewer that area. And this has gone from you know, number of acres taken out to, you know, taking 22% out. What you're trying to do is build enough ponds to mitigate the nitrogen. Because the more open water you have, and the deeper that open water is, the more time you want to slow down the water flow so there's more chance for the nitrogen to be removed, either sucked up by life forms, algae and stuff, or if it's anaerobic to be reduced to nitrogen, you know, gone up into the air. So you want to do that. In the negotiations been, we want to do that to remove nitrogen. There's been, on the other side of the table, there's been trying to reduce that flow and increase the wetlands, which doesn't reduce the nitrogen. I would like us as a board, and what my push is, before this is finalized, to make a clear statement that we want to get as close as possible to the original plan of removing this houses to get to the savings that we promised everyone. And that's my only point. I'm hoping that you guys, you know, agree with me that we don't want to give up on that and all of a sudden, you know, say, we're not doing that. We're going to give up to nitrogen because of the other aspects of this. And it looks like we're moving that direction. I just want to be sure.
Yeah, actually, it's through you, Madam Chair. It certainly has been a long way project. I would say, Larry, that, you know, I'm always clear I work for the town of Harwich, period. And in this case, our mission is that we need to remove nitrogen so we don't have to sewer those homes. And, you know,
and I realize that. I want to be sure you're supported on that, that we have the full board support.
I appreciate that. And I would say, you know, this is a little bit funny because we're inviting ourselves to someone else's house and we're telling them how to cook dinner. So this is not our property. This is someone else's property, Harwich Conservation Trust. They have been a great partner. The town and HCT and my relationship with Mike Lack, I think, has been very constructive. I think actually Michael may have been in on one of our meetings. And I think that there's been a difference of opinion in regards to the science. How effective is a marsh versus how effective is a lake versus how effective is salt marsh. And it's been an interesting discussion. The good news is, the very good news is, I think we've reached agreement where we are gonna get those numbers that we're looking for, that we told the community that we would look for in the nitrogen reduction. And I really pleaded at the last meeting with HCT, because it's a separate group, they're making sure that they have their constituency and his board is okay and comfortable. And the next step is to make sure that I can come back and say, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to accomplish the nitrogen reduction. I'm very confident that our experts will say that the plan presented will validate not having to sewer those. That's the mission.
Yep.
And we will, the next step is we need to accomplish that through a memorandum of understanding, kind of similar to what we did with Chatham in terms of some of the projects with them, a partner on how to do Muddy Creek in the middle, that we will do a partnership agreement and we will focus the elements of those partnership agreements on nitrogen reduction. And some of the missions that they have, which is more scenic and bird watching, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, it's just they have a different mission than we have in this circumstance, that they need to find their funding to accomplish that. And where we can partner up and put in for grants to be able to accomplish our mission and theirs, I think it lends itself to do that. My hope is in the next 30 to 45 days that we'll come in and do a presentation on how what we have here, what you have, the consensus agreement, will accomplish both of those elements.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so on to the town administrator's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to rattle through these. On the flaking plovers at Red River Beach, I keep asking when are they going to take flight? Not yet, continues to be the answer I get. The good news is we have reduced the amount of area, so we now have the minimal area necessary for them to be able to do what they need to do. And I'm hoping that any day now that they will take flight and then we can lift that. Just so people are aware, there is a possibility, I mean, July 4th is only a little bit more than a week away, that it was about 30 days, which brings us to June 30th. So we're going to be right in that window. As soon as the birds take flight, we will have those barriers lifted. But until that time, we need to comply with that element. The next item is on the update for the checklist for streamlining contracts. I think Evan's only been on board 2 weeks, and he's been, this has been a focal point. We have a department head meeting tomorrow where we'll kind of go over kind of the expectation, try to let the organization know what we're trying to accomplish, that we need this information and we need it in a more readily accessible fashion. So you have a sample of today, what you see, what we're kind of headed towards. I think we need to have a little bit of continuing improvement and then get the organization to buy in so we can get this information. The next item is on the planning board. I will be attending, most likely I'll be attending, or I'll send Evan to attend. I am in the process of selling my house, so I'm trying to juggle a few more balls in the air than I normally do out in Sturbridge, but I am at this point planning on going. But we are trying to get an expansion of the parking lot at Schoolhouse. We do need to get planning board approval to be able to accomplish that. The goal will be, if we're able to accomplish that approval at tomorrow night's meeting, then I will meet with Lynn Cooper and see what we're able to do in the short term to try to generate some parking in that area. Most likely, all this stuff is very expensive. The little driveway into the TD Bank lot, just doing the driveway and some fencing was $30,000. So with the discussion earlier this evening about $50,000, we will do what we can do with the resources to have kind of a dirt parking lot. Dirt doesn't cost anything. We'll use the machines we have to do what we can do. But to do something on a more permanent basis probably will be a capital item for the future. But the first thing is, I gotta get approval to be able to do what we wanna do. So that will be tomorrow night.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before you go on from the subject, just to repeat what we've said in the past, some point in time, I'd love to have it on the agenda to have a discussion with stakeholders like the chamber and representing the businesses, but overall about the possibility of having some sort of seasonal paid parking and how that might look with all the inventory of parking we have. I know Provincetown does it. It's not meters. I know they do it at the harbor at Barnstable. And it's getting to the point where we probably want to get ahead of this and just at least discuss where would we want to do it, if we want to do it at all, and how would it look, because these things take time. It's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, that's, I would like to, if we're gonna talk about parking meters, I know John Rendon did have, or it's paid parking. I know John Rendon has had some discussion. Obviously, I was in a community where we had an extensive amount of that I was responsible for. But when he's run that up the flagpole here, it hasn't been very well received. So I think that, Larry's laughing, that's an understatement. But, that's something that I just, if the board wants us to pursue, it is a different board, it's a different time, but just, we can re-examine that, if so.
Well, one other note on that, I think we should also be looking at, because it may be a great remedy for the harbor and downtown and all, is the shuttle bus idea, in terms of, shuttling people from the harbor into town and back and around and parking.
Or the cultural center.
Or right, and so we've got these big parking lots at schools that aren't used on weekends and such, which is when really the crunch is.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be looking at that too, I would think. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to make it crystal clear to the public, we're not looking for a new revenue stream of some sort, but it's getting to the point now where, let's be honest, the schoolhouse parking lot every year becomes more and more. When people start walking out of the lot with a raft over their head, they're not going shopping. They're heading towards the beach. And it's become worse than I've ever seen it in terms of, like, I just don't want to buy that beach sticker. And that clogs up the parking for all the businesses because those people aren't shopping anywhere. They're just using the parking lot, and it's not equitable. So somewhere or another, I'm not even talking about a year, but somewhere or another, we have to have a discussion about, with shuttle buses, and some paid parking in some areas, how do we get a turnover in those spaces so that they're not just co-opted for 8 hours as sun gods?
I do think it's great that Cindy Williams attends quite a few of our meetings
Right.
from the chamber, and certainly we have a very constructive relationship, so we can certainly see about
Michael?
I just want to comment on Don's comment. Our beach sticker sales continue to rise, and our businesses are doing great because we're doing what we're doing. I'd be very cautious about adding another fee to this town. I think we're lucky to have these people here and supporting all of our businesses, so.
Larry?
No point.
Okay.
So just, last thing that I have here is, I just kind of wanted to announce it was about a $30,000 contract through CPC, but on Brooks Academy Museum, they are hiring, the committee is hiring a group, Burchax and eWorks architect, to kind of look at that building. I know one of the challenges when I toured that with them is that there is no elevator handicapped access to the second floor, and they do have displays on both the first and second floor, so I think their primary focus will be ADA related. And just while I'm on ADA, we are in the process, actually I think Larry may have attended one of the meetings on the ADA committee, that we get a grant to do that work on the ADA study, so we are getting some of the initial draft of that I need to, I think the committee has a meeting.
I think next week, comes up
coming
pretty
up.
close, yeah.
So we are working on that project to bring that to finalization. And that element did have a presentation to the Board of Selectmen in public to find out what their findings are. But I think in at least the initial reaction, nothing really egregious. The town has done a pretty good job on ADA, which I think is overall a good message. That concludes my comments, unless there's any questions.
On this study, what's the cost of it?
It's $30,000. Because it's below the $50,000 threshold. I just wanted to alert the board that I had awarded that.
Okay.
So I said I would do that for projects that are different.
And the only other thing was that middle school, I just had said about that on the.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did go over that. I did follow up with the board, thank you. I reminded you and you reminded me. So in terms of that, I did send over, and I have not had a opportunity to follow up with Mr. Carpenter to find out what the status is, but we did send that line of demarcation of the boundary, and just hopefully they can get a vote, and we can have a vote on our end to resolve that more formally than it's been done in the past.
Michael?
If I may, what vote are we looking for?
School committee.
But what are we gonna vote on, what are they gonna vote on? It's either we own the land or they own the land, correct?
I think it's just an acceptance that the line is where the line is.
Okay.
That's all, it's the way I view it.
Well, we own all the land, it's just where the lease line runs.
Right.
But on the study with Brooks Academy, you know, I looked at the material you put in, and it's a lot, and but nowhere does it really succinctly indicate what the goal of the study is. You know, like a one paragraph. If we could,
Okay.
you know, because you get a lot of pretty pictures and a lot of interesting information, but you really get lost trying to find what the purpose of the project is.
I think one of the things that I need to do organizationally is just say to folks that they're ingrained in the project, they know all about it, but they need to
Step back.
provide a step back and a summary, so that way it can be articulated to the general public and others that have an interest in it. That concludes my report this evening.
Well, and then the departmental reports, the recommended
Oh,
monthly
I'm sorry.
reports. I just don't wanna miss a, opportunity just because it's on here.
Just
to have
one
that
of the things,
discussion.
I know that department heads, actually, even myself, I have been really struggling trying to do a weekly report. So I think it would go over better. I do think there's some value to those as we do the annual report at the end, to kind of have the highlights of what occurred. But I would like to see if we could do that on a monthly basis, and see if we could just hit the highlights of what it was accomplished during the month. I think a lot, and certainly, they just kind of hit some of these tick points that I don't know if it really has significant value. With that being said, I would like, if the board is kind of okay with this, that if we do have areas of a department head has something new and different that they want to bring up or alert the board, that maybe we invite them in beyond just the annual report. I think when we have boards and committees come in, and to give the board a opportunity to kind of see and educate the public,
I think Lynn Cooper has been really good at that with the new permits, you know, for recycling and so forth. So I don't want to discourage departments from coming in and sharing, and I think that that may be a better format, though, for them to come in if they have specific items that they think are worthy of further town information. But if we could go to monthly, I think that that would be appreciated organization-wide.
So can I get some feedback on that?
I think at this point, we're meeting bi-weekly, why not do it bi-weekly? I think it's a great information piece. I think not just for the board, but I think the residents like it. I've had a lot of great comments about people wanting to know what's going on. I think it's a great idea, as often as possible.
Larry?
I would probably, in this case, agree with Chris and back off a bit to a month, because it is a lot of work. And I do like the idea of, because I actually tried to institute this some time back, and I really had two purposes. One was to educate everyone. The other one was to give the department heads, not every month, but maybe once a quarter, however it rotates, a chance to stand up and be recognized in town. And to, quite frankly, tell us what they're doing good. We hammer sometimes they're doing bad, but list some activities so we get some recognition of what our town staff is doing. So I would like that to happen, not every month, but a couple times a year so that they're recognized.
Well, looking at, we have a couple of reports here that are same department, and they're two separate weekly reports, and it's sort of like from one week to the next, they're pretty much the same, and I think getting the information over a month period, because there's very little difference, and highlighting those more unique or special things that the department undertook, rather than just reiterating that they did beach cleaning 5 days during the week, and the next week they did beach cleaning 5 days again.
Right. Right.
It sort of seems like a lot of excess busy work.
Mm-hmm. Don?
Yeah, I'm somewhat torn, because I agree with Michael that we're playing with house money, and people should have an opportunity to see how we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering whether, just out of the sheer volume of this, that we might want to consider going every 2 weeks with half of the departments on 1 2-week cycle and half of them on the other, so that they're alternating on monthly, but we're throwing information out there that people can read, as opposed to getting buried in data.
Well, if I could, I'd like to, and I'm happy to do this. I recently had my daughter and my wife, and I went and I showed them Saquatucket Harbor, and we walked the project. And it's interesting, when I was down there once, I had one of our employees came up and said that one of the boat owners came up and said, I haven't seen a harbor this nice or this professional since I was in San Diego. And, that is a great compliment to that project. And, I'd like to have John Rendon come in and just, let's do updates so the general public knows, because not everybody gets a chance to go down there. And, kind of share those and bring them in for different opportunities, and try, even if I have to kind of rotate through to people and say, well, I'd like to have you come in and just kind of talk about projects that are going on, just a way to kind of educate the community in a constructive way, and certainly let people know, some of the challenges that we're up against.
But what Michael had said does have merit, because people want to see what's happening. Now, the question is, are we going to do it every 2 weeks or every month? What I was suggesting is taking half the departments and doing them in the middle of the month, and half of them doing the beginning of the month. That becomes monthly, but there's always going to be a report, half of the reports to read, so that the public gets an idea of what's going on. But, I mean, Michael's also got a point that, you know, every 2 weeks is still a good idea. And I know Ed's telling the truth too, because you read the same report, it's just they fill a
Right.
different date in.
Right. Did you want to say something else?
Well, you know, Don's concept of sort of rotate, you know, offset and rotating.
Yeah, we could have some
is
due on the
fine.
15th and some due on the 1st.
But,
I misunderstood.
but on, you know, projects like the harbor project or any of those big physical projects, and I'm hoping somebody behind the screens doesn't throw something after me, but when we did the high school, we did every 2 weeks we did a film, and I think the public received that quite well, and it would have been nice to have John set that up and follow the project through so folks could watch it happen.
I could talk to the cable people.
So what is the resolution here?
But
Yeah, so
But
what
If you like,
direction,
I mean, if it's monthly, I can have half the departments due on the 15th and the other half do it on the 1st, so that way we kind of rotate through, so there's always information kind of coming in.
well, why don't we try that? Do you want to try
Fine.
that?
That's fine with me.
So you'll
Yep.
direct,
Yes,
okay?
so thank you.
Selectmen's report. Don?
Well now, the flagpole out on 39 and Route 137 is not really a flagpole. For those people who aren't familiar with it, I mean the board is, but I'm assuming nothing. It's really a cell tower site that's disguised as a flagpole. When we put that up, it was Sprint LLC that did it. They've laid off the contract a number of times so that it became an assumption to various companies. Now, the company before this one put a bump out in that pole, and the covers have blown off. It's not going to have a flag on it for the 4th of July. It didn't have one on it for Memorial Day. The contract specifically calls for it to be available as a flagpole to fly a flag. They have been in breach of that with this. Now, I don't want to go to any great extents with this, but I do want to make everybody aware that it's supposed to be functional as a flagpole. And I'll tell you what, if I had a barn and I walked into it and I knocked my head against the top of the doorway every single time I walked there, that's no longer an accident, it's predictable. These panels have blown off. They are claiming that there's special order and that they need to be fabricated. In my world, once that happens 3, 4, 5 times, you have a pair of them set up so that you got them in a warehouse to be able to bring them out. This has now been going on since March, and even when they get this fixed, it's likely to be an issue in the future. I just want everybody to know that I apologize, the flag's not going to be up, but they need to be held accountable to the contract in the future somehow. That's it.
Ed?
Well, I just want to congratulate the folks that put on the Harwich Port 5K run over the past weekend. It was trying times, but all the volunteers stayed out in the midst of rain and saw it through. And a half hour before race time, it was looking like, well, I guess nobody's showing up because it's raining, but all of a sudden people came out of the ground at race time. And they were hidden away in every little dry corner of Harwich Port. And it was a great race that went off. And I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for their efforts on pulling that together every year.
Michael?
All set?
Larry?
Speaking about the Pleasant Bay Alliance targeted watershed permit that we talked about, Chris and I were sent emails today that the DEP, Brian Dudley DEP, received the application and submission for the MEPA certificate. And so right now he has everything he needs, and all that needs to be done is to issue the final permit. So that's a big step forward. That's one other thing we can cross off our list of of getting done.
Excellent. I just want to remind people that Amy was in front of us tonight with the Conservation Work Party for Wednesday at 9 o'clock. Also, the planning board hearing regarding the parking tomorrow night at 6:30, because that's important to everybody in town, really. I also just want to reiterate the gratitude for Bob Lutton. I think we all feel he did a great job, and it's great having him. And I was down at Saquatucket today, and it's just amazing. It's absolutely stunning what it looks like right now. So I can't wait to see it when it's truly everything's done. Ed?
Just one last note. I know we've all probably received emails regarding the Cape One meetings coming up at Wachusett, and the Selectmen's Association is actually talking with the folks of the commission. I think it would be the breakfast of the second day, having a selectmen's meeting breakfast, and the commission is going to do some special presentations aimed at sort of updating the selectmen and towns on a couple of topics. So if you could keep that in mind.
One last thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to owe the chair a quarter here because the over-under for this meeting in the office pool was somewhere around 11 o'clock, and she brought it in before 9.
Move to adjourn.
On that note.
All right, we're